I'm Dan Costa. I'm the Chief Content Officer at Worth Media Group and Techonomy. I'm very pleased to have this conversation about the responsible deployment of AI. Obviously, AI has been a big topic of conversation here at Davos, and we've got two great experts to talk about it with. We've got Suzanne Dan, the CEO of the Americas for Wipro, and Alex McMullen, the CTO for Pure Storage. I think one of the things, there was just a statistic I heard yesterday that in 2024, 75% of companies are going to be moving from doing proof of concepts on AI to actually operationalizing the technology. Is that the pattern that you're seeing in the market with your clients? Suzanne, maybe we'll start with you.
Yeah, so thank you. Thank you all for joining us so early in the morning. So we've seen over the course of this past year, we saw the excitement around Gen AI. Then we saw people playing around doing proof of concepts, and then moving into, okay, how do we actually implement and do something real? And through this journey at Wipro, our clients really expect us to be the orchestrators of all this. How do we bring together an understanding of the right use case, the right business problem to solve with Gen AI, through to the governance you need, the data you need, the security you need to consider? So we've put together a blueprint, almost like a checklist, 7 steps to really walk you through how do you operationalize it. And we've done this ourselves. So we've implemented a few use cases within Wipro. I'll give you an example. We implemented a chatbot called WeNow, which across 40 functions, it uses Gen AI to answer employee questions. So everything from what are my benefits to helping me orchestrate what are the policies around a certain activity. So I think today we're at about 4.5 to 5 million queries answered for employees, and we're reaching up to about 98% accuracy. So a very relevant use case, a very impactful use case, but that's giving us the experience of operationalizing it with the right governance so we can share that with our clients.
Excellent. How about with Pure Storage's customers?
Okay, so I guess for context, good morning, everyone. Pure is an infrastructure supplier to many of the larger companies operating in the machine learning, artificial intelligence spaces. We were NVIDIA's first partner in 2016-17. We've been supplying folks like Meta, for example, in that same time frame, and we're now deployed at exabyte scale in many of those use cases. What we've seen over the last 18 months in particular, Suzanne says, with the uptick in generative AI, kicked off, I guess, by probably OpenAI and ChatGPT, all of those contexts have driven every large and even medium-sized company into the journey of how they can help with generative use cases in terms of efficiency or security or interactivity with a data set, which is where the most interesting developments are taking place right now. The general challenge has been, great, I've got some data, I've got some very expensive computers. How do I get from there to business success or even profit on that basis? And that's part of the journey we'll talk about today.
I think one of the other dynamics in terms of that are driving the adoption of AI, there's a school of thought that this is a tool for creating efficiencies and possibly reducing headcount in the process. There's probably fewer people in your HR team that needs to answer these questions. But then there's another school of thought that these tools are really going to be growth factors and enable companies to do more, individuals to do more. The truth is, it'll probably be a mix of both. But which side of that do you come down on, efficiency versus growth, AI applications?
So similarly, I saw a statistic that said we'll see $4 trillion in productivity per year from Gen AI. So we're optimistic around what we'll see in terms of productivity gains, but also in terms of growth. I think there's both opportunities. Wipro has announced a $1 billion investment in Gen AI over the next 3 years. So we are really investing in AI and thinking how we can lead with AI in all that we do, in our solutions, in how we go to market, and the right use cases, and making sure it's responsible. So how do we as an organization ensure our value system and the ethics in which we apply AI is throughout everything that we do, whether it's for productivity or whether it's for growth. And we've led that through a set of frameworks in terms of making sure that we have the right governance and policies and training for our people to get there. And that's been a core of what we've been doing to really support both agendas.
Paul, how are you on the growth versus efficiency?
So I think from our perspective, it's certainly probably 90-10 swing in terms of innovation and growth. yes, everybody in the C-suite wants to make cost savings. That's part of the nature of the game. But all of these investments are a kind of a spend to save thing by outcompeting the business down the street or in the next zip code, but also pushing back on current investments. So everybody has a data set which is 10% used and 90% is essentially digital landfill. Everybody is now in that same kind of circular economy, remining that data for nuggets of gold, but also thinking about how historical data can help shape the future of a number of businesses. A good example of that would be something like geology. You might have a data set that's 30 years old, but the Earth hasn't changed shape by structure in the last 25 years. So all of that geological data is still relevant. You can go search for newer pots of oil, let's say, or even gold, diamonds, etc., who are all being 3D seismic imaged on that basis. So all data is still valuable, but very much the focus for the customers we're working with is investing to be better, faster, and in some ways cheaper. But as I mentioned, the path to profit is still a little less clear. AI investments are generally $10 million as a starting point and going from there up to hundreds with some of the scale that we see. So the focus very much from the C-suite has been, great, I've given my data scientists, my engineers, my researchers this great set of tools, but then that next part of the step, that's where expertise from a company like Wipro comes in terms of, I don't want to say monetizing because that somehow sullies the conversation this morning, but that certainly is part of the, very much the dialogue, Dan.
Yeah.
Points for going from data mining to a geology reference.
Glad that wasn't lost. One of us had coffee this morning.
Mining for gold.
Good work.
You know, I was with you. It's early, but I caught it.
Good work.
So, you know, it brings me to I was at breakfast yesterday. There was another Wipro executive there, and somebody referred to Wipro as one of the companies that's dealing with the yucky problems of AI deployment, and they meant it as a compliment.
Yeah.
And because as you move from the great pilot test that two engineers did an LLM that can answer HR questions, which they may or may not have showed to the legal department or any other department in the organization, this is where that, you know, putting these solutions out there requires some buy-in, and it gets yucky, it gets complex, and it's the kind of problem that has been happening in companies as they embrace digital transformation. But it seems like there's even more stakeholders with interests in this. Can you talk a little bit about how Wipro's trying to wrangle those cats?
Yeah, I think that's funny that it's the yucky problems, but the yucky problems are something of the more interesting problems. We really strive to drive innovation and push in terms of what we can do to solve our clients' most challenging problems. And with that, we hit yucky problems. That's probably an accurate statement. So with AI, what we're finding though also is it's not just, okay, I have a skunk work projects, I get it. As you mentioned earlier, how do I operationalize that? Do I have the right frameworks? Do I have the right governance structures? And we built governance within our existing governance model, so that way we're not building a layer on top and slowing down innovation. So making sure that we're asking the right questions. Do we have the right data? Do we have the right security? Are we ensuring the right transparency about what it is we are providing back? Is the answers accurate? Is it fair? Is it unbiased? So all of that has to be taken into consideration. And what's interesting is we're actually building tools, IP, to help take what might come out of a LLM and provide greater context to it. So we have something called our Wipro Gen AI framework. And there's a tool that we've used on one of our more recent projects called the Chunker, another not the most glamorous name. But what it does is it helps rephrase queries, provides context, semantics. So what comes out is a lot more accurate than what would have just come out straight from the LLM answering the question. So we're providing this so we can get to a greater level of accuracy for our clients, and a whole set of tools like that we could build on top. So taking those icky problems and making them into solutions that we can then scale. Because the key is, how do you scale that pilot that worked so well and operationalize that? And then take advantage of the massive amount of data that all of our firms have with regard to the business that they're in, whether it's mining, whether it's oil and gas, or whether it's financial payments. So I think that's where the opportunity lies.
One of those yucky problems in deploying AI, and you hinted at it, Alex, is that not only does this take a lot of data, the data takes a lot of storage, but then you need a ton of compute to throw at these problems. Can you just talk a little bit about what are the requirements? People type queries into chat boxes all the time. What happens after they do that? And what's required in order to deliver that answer on the back end that most consumers and even executives never even think about until the bill comes due?
Yes. So that's also a yucky problem, but it's probably less well discussed. It was one of the front and center topics at COP28 in terms of the mechanical, electrical, power, data center, cost impact of building an AI system. And to Dan's question, answering that more directly, when you type something into ChatGPT, a segue here, it turns out I'm an AI expert because I did advanced statistics 20 years ago, and it's kind of the same thing now. So any word you type into ChatGPT is assigned a statistical weight, and it then kicks off a massive parallel query into a huge set of tables and indexes and statistical weights of words that look like the words that you just typed, and it brings back a bunch of those. So when you think about a curve, the computer is essentially, after a few seconds of doing that, going, I think that's the closest match to what you just typed, and brings that back to you. But that's generated billions of computer instructions, gigabytes of data back and forth across a network. The AI cluster could be 10, it could be 20 nodes, it could be 10,000 nodes for some of the larger ones that we work with. So the concept there is, what may seem simple is very much a path toward a order of magnitude increase in the data center requirements for an AI system. We'll probably come back to that as well, but if it's very much like the Wizard of Oz pulling back behind the curtain. It's not an old guy with his dog. It's a hugely complex parallel processing machine that's generating terabytes of data every second on that basis. So there is a hidden but very large cost.
And one of the ways to mitigate that, as I understand it, is that you don't the large language models that are powering ChatGPT are trying to do everything for all people under any circumstance and have these massive back-end data sets. But to answer employee questions, presumably you don't need that same size data set. You can customize it and use a private, sort of a private version of it. Does that help ameliorate the cost of deploying these solutions?
So yes-ish is the very unhelpful answer to that point. Yes, you can start small with an AI system. If your corpus of data is your HR knowledge base, then yes, that's fine. But it's also less helpful overall, because if you think about statistical data points, the more points you have, the better the answer is likely to be on that basis. But that's where you get to the pointy end of the AI ethics challenge in terms of the data set that you use, the model that you deploy, and then should you use either of those in the first place? And I think that's where we're heading in terms of the conversation. But yes, you can do it on a smaller, more helpful basis, but the answer isn't likely to be as good for you, particularly when there's translation or nuance or even English second language or English third language, as most of the modern world is now.
Yeah. I think the power is both. So what we're doing is building open AI platforms. Ours is AI 360, which is really the intent to pull in open LLMs, the best of breed, right? As well as you can bring your data, your context. Because the two of them combined can be very powerful. Because it provides maybe context on translation or whatever it may be. I see many of our clients thinking, and we've heard this used so many times over this weekend, or the past 2 days at Davos, is Copilot. You know, our clients are really entering what I've seen as many use cases around how do I enhance my knowledge workers? Whether it's someone in a contact center or somebody in a role where they need to be the smartest and best at their role, using the information that's already there and getting them up to speed much quicker because they have this Copilot next to them. And that truly, I believe, is what we're starting to see in both the productivity and efficiency gains that our clients, and that's where I see a number of our clients experimenting in terms of taking all the great knowledge they have in their environment, using Gen AI to enable their teams to be much more efficient and much more productive and deliver high quality service to their clients because they end up being the smartest at what they do because they have all that knowledge to support them. And I think that's where we'll see the game changing around innovation.
I think that's a great point. It's amazing that term Copilot. I think Microsoft's trying to trademark it, but it's out there. It's the Kleenex of AI knowledge applications. But the we're talking ostensibly about responsible deployment of AI. That sounds like a fantastic use of the technology, but it sort of implies that there may be irresponsible applications and that there should be some guidelines. What does the responsible deployment of AI mean to you? How would you define that?
Yeah, so there's 4 pillars we think about. It's transparency, it's privacy, it's accountability, and ensuring that we have that accountability, transparency, privacy, and security. So all of that needs together be at the foundation of all we do. The governance is critical, and we've learned that. So building the governance into how we approach AI through all of our process, everything from when we start a client project, understanding what data we're going to be using, what's the use case, what are the platforms, all those pieces need to be considered. And we help our clients walk through that. In addition, just beyond, we've pulled together a task force led by our global privacy officer, and that really makes sure that we're building those risk frameworks at all levels, from employees through to our risk management systems, all the way, to audit, to making sure we tie at all 3 levels as an organization and help our clients do the same. So those pieces are at the core of everything we're doing around Gen AI. At the end of the day, there will be malicious behavior. There will be ways that Gen AI will be used in ways that we could never imagine. And we'll learn from that. And we're going to have to adapt. Just like we regulate financial services, there will, and we're already beginning to see regulation around Gen AI. Now, that's not going to stop necessarily bad behaviors, but it'll be key to create frameworks. And we've heard Sam Altman and others talk about, the importance of having some regulation to making sure that there's guardrails for how it's being used, how it's being communicated, so people know what they're using. Are they talking to a human? Or are they talking to a bot? Where was this data created from? Where did this answer come from? How do I know that it is accurate? That is important. And as us as consumers, as well as being part of the business, it is our responsibility to make sure that we're implementing that in such a way.
Excellent. Alex, what do you think about when we talk about responsible AI?
So the way I look at the responsible conversation is the overlap between what we would term business ethics versus AI ethics. Business ethics in general are inwardly focused on how a company treats its own employees primarily, and customers are kind of a second order part of that conversation. With AI ethics, the data set is generally sourced from outside the company, so it's much more about the real world outside you, and whether that's the principles that Suzanne's laid out very nicely in terms of the integrity, the fairness, respect, security, privacy. Those are the key parts of that. But there's a much wider conversation, particularly when you get into the large language model side of things in terms of data governance being the most key and critical thing. And that's why you see these different camps already set up in terms of the effective altruists who want to slow down things, the people who are pushing for more regulation to keep control of that. There's also a third part of that who wants to have everything as open season and push on with innovation as quickly as possible. I mean, there are some amazing things happening with artificial intelligence in terms of everything from modeling fluids in space rockets or simulating chemical interactions to try and map the genome or trying to cure some of the most awful congenital diseases, but even the most basic things now in terms of making a better battery as we push on to EVs. Those are all dependent on a data set. The New York Times lawsuit of OpenAI is fascinating. It's kind of a bellwether for how this whole direction of conversation is going to go. I'm pretty sure you used my data, so how am I benefiting from you benefiting from using that data? And that's where the provenance and the governance and the understanding comes in, because, again, as Suzanne mentioned, adversarial AI is very much a thing out there in the world. If you're still using voice recognition for your banking, I suggest you find another way of doing so, because that, in terms of security, is already gone. We're heading into a world where video can just as easily be faked or shaped or shopped, tweaked. We're getting to the point where trust becomes the most important part of that. As I've heard many times from some of the smart data scientists that we work with, AI is not the problem. People are the problem. So that's where we're getting to.
Yeah.
I've heard that many, many times in many different contexts, and it's always true. One of the solutions I've heard is that we're going to have to use AIs to govern and police AIs. I haven't heard a lot of examples for how that's going to work. But I mean, how what solutions are there for governing this new age where, there's an infinite amount of content that can be represented and people don't know what to believe.
Going back to the theme of Davos and what you just said about trust, that's at the core. And responsible businesses responsible to not only impact society in a positive way, but the environment in a positive way and technology. And I think it truly is the responsibility of leaders to make sure you're using it in a responsible way. And this will be a time that companies either build or erode trust with their constituents. I truly believe that. And that is why I see so many firms taking their time, learning the internal use cases, such as what we did with our functions, and learning how that can be applied, understanding the accuracy, and ensuring that it's something we want to do and we want to provide to our employees, and broadening that. And I see companies doing the same thing. Just this week, speaking to some of the large banks, really understanding their focus being their value proposition to their clients, holding up that value proposition, but at the same time, using AI where there's a use case that makes sense for AI, not just for the sake of using AI. And I know there's a tremendous amount of excitement about it, and I'm excited. I think it's a fantastic opportunity for everyone, employees, technology firms, and it's moving at a pace we've never seen. But at the same time, we've got to make sure we're using it in a way where it makes sense and where it's creating value and it's deriving accuracy for clients and consumers alike.
Yes, I would amplify that in terms of, if we think about how AI is positioned in terms of, forgive me if anyone works in marketing, but how it's marketed today, we've been kind of imbued with this sort of almost osmosis kind of brainwashing for the last 20 years of science fiction shows, films, TV, that AI is somehow omniscient and all-knowing and super intelligent. The reality of that is AI is giving you its best guess based on what it thinks it knows. It's not perfect. It's never always correct. AI is there to help you, to guide you. Generative AI is actually more interesting because at least when you engage with a generative AI, you know that it's kind of there or thereabouts, or at least in the ballpark. We've been so used to getting the correct answer from a computer for the last 20 years. We now have a paradigm shift of, I've asked the computer, it said the answer was 47, but it's in that kind of 20 to 70 range is the real answer. So that's a big challenge for us. In terms of Dan's question, governing an AI system with an AI, it's, who watches the watchers? That's always been the challenge. If you've got a car that at least claims some level of autonomy in driving, you'll know how unlikely that is in the next decade. We don't yet know how to define an artificial general intelligence. AGI is the goal, always has been since the 50s, but we don't know if we're 5% of the way there or 98% of the way there. We have no clue. So how can we possibly get to the point where one watcher watches the other watcher and says, I don't think that's right anymore. So a long way to travel on that side of things. It comes back to trust. That's where it really comes back to, and that's where.
That's why humans are still training these AIs,
Yes,
right? And humans have a conscience. AI does not.
One of the other potential watchmen is government. You both have run work at international organizations with in a variety of regulatory environments. The Biden administration put out some guidelines. They seemed entirely anodyne and generic, but probably not a bad idea. Also not official or binding. Like, how confident are you that we can have the government regulations that we need to sort of build this up in a responsible way?
So we've seen the Biden administration, the executive order. The EU has come out with some early regulations. So we will be an early adopter and hopefully have some input around what the EU is doing in terms of regulatory guidance. I expect we'll see more as we learn. The key part that we feel very strongly about is making sure that we are, as I go back to how we build in the responsibility and governance to the best of our ability with our clients. They expect that of us. And we expect to follow the values of the firms that we're working with in terms of how we assess, build, train these models and use them. And I think that is all on the responsibility of the leadership of firms in that manner. Because just as I said, we could regulate, but we don't know all the things that we're going to see, and we don't know all the challenges. And there will be malicious actors, just as we've seen in the cyber world, regardless of what regulatory looks like. So I think it's all up to us to make sure we're doing everything we can around a data security perspective, privacy, transparency with our clients, and that's on us regardless of where regulation takes us. And at the end of the day, we're both in technology, and we thrive on innovation, and we want to see innovation thrive. And that always is the intent, to make sure we're using technology and having our people get excited about what we're doing. You know, we've trained our 210,000 people on Gen AI fundamentals and responsible AI. Everyone is trained. And then they have opportunities to take more training, and the consumption is amazing. Seeing everyone excited and the opportunities around innovation and technology this brings. So we could talk about regulation and how important it is. But at the same, we don't want to dampen innovation. But we need to do it in a responsible way, and that's on all of us as business leaders, quite candidly.
Yes, I think the key part of regulation thus far has been that there is actually regulation, and that the various international governments are sending messages in terms of this is an industry we're going to regulate. The regulation right now is pretty much a pro forma in terms of don't do bad things, but none of those things are really defined. But the key message is, if you think about how we got here in terms of the internet isn't really regulated, policed, and part of its power and success has been that it's expanded to all corners of the world without any interference. And yes, we now have great firewalls in various countries and suppression of information in those countries, but it has gotten to a point where that innovation took us to a whole new paradigm shift as a society. For artificial intelligence, major governments have said, we are looking over your shoulder. We will make sure the data you use, the output of that, will actually drive for a better society. What's currently missing is accountability, which is the one that everybody wants to duck. I saw some stuff in the press this week that in various states in the US, you can point to your car and say, well, the car was speeding, it wasn't me, and that gets you a buy, apparently. So it's already in flight on that basis, but...
Did not work at the last trooper that pulled over.
Didn't work for you, Dan.
Yeah.
No.
You know what I was just thinking, though? We've been doing AI for years, 10 years. We have AI built into so many solutions we already have at Wipro with our clients. And only now with Gen AI is this excitement and concern, and because it's been democratized, that we need to regulate. But the reality is it's already built in AI into so many things we do across every industry.
Yeah.
So this is just the next level, moving at very rapid pace. So I think it does remain to be seen where we head.
Yeah, the algorithms, we've been living under the algorithms rule for quite a while. And now I think it really was given that chat box and letting everyone log in. Yeah. And the first thing that happened is all the kids logged in and had to do their homework.
Yeah.
Nobody had to train them. Nobody had to explain that this was possible. It was simply put out there and it was embraced. And that, I think, really has changed the conversation in the last year.
I agree.
So let's take a look forward. It's been an amazing year in terms of how quickly perceptions have changed, even if the technology has been moving in a more linear fashion. But like, what are we going to be talking about a year from now? And then try and tell me what you foresee 5 years down the road. Here at Davos, when we're talking about AI, what types of topics, what types of concerns are we going to have?
I can't even imagine what we're going to be talking about 5 years, so I'm not even going to try. And I don't have a crystal ball. But I truly, we've watched the conversation shift over the years and and we see what's going on in the economy. We've seen what's going on globally with the wars. There's half of the world is going through an election this coming year. There's a lot happening. Mm-hmm. So I could not predict what we're going to be talking about next year. I do believe, though, we'll see the maturing of AI conversation, going from a bit of this excitement and hype to real implementations that people can point their finger at and say it made a true added value to either the economy, society, or business. I do believe the conversation around security and privacy will amplify. There's been a lot of discussion around where quantum is leading, and that will change a lot of how we think about security and privacy.
Wow.
and the access to quantum.
What is quantum?
Well, changes the way we think about securing with passwords and ID. It will be able, the ability of a quantum computer will be able to unlock that.
So cracking the encryption,
Absolutely.
that one step.
We need to rethink how we secure secure our world, secure our data. So that's that. And as there's more access to quantum, the innovation is amazing in terms of the amount of compute and what it will be able to do in solving some of our biggest challenges. But at the same time, it's going to open the door to things we need to reconsider in the next 5 years. So I think that may become more of a topic as we progress, but time will tell.
So in a year's time, I hope we're not talking about elections, although it remains a huge concern. Obviously, we all remember 2016 and Brexit and Cambridge Analytica and some of the fallout from that, but we hope there isn't too much in terms of misinformation, no medying for those of you who've worked in that industry. The 5-year path, I think, is much more interesting in terms of the horizons that it lifts for us. Healthcare is probably the biggest short-term benefit that we can come across in terms of getting to a point where we fully understand cell mutation and cancer. If we got rid of cancer in the next 10 years, that would be a huge benefit. The tailoring of medicine to be more effective, better antibiotics for some of the more resistant strains, it's a bigger and upcoming problem that we deal with. The way in which we treat diagnostics. And if you think about artificial intelligence, it was very eloquently described by Ben Evans as having unlimited interns working for you. And that's a nice way of thinking about it. Having them do all of that, I don't want to call it grunt work, but really that's what it is at this point in terms of results and trends, projections, understanding those things in particular, but also chemistry, the physics, having batteries that will last you more than 20 minutes on your phone or 200 miles on your car, better chemistry there, but also agriculture and weather, because there's a huge overlap with artificial intelligence and sustainability that we don't want to talk about right now. But the long-term plan for having a population that will approach 10 billion in the next 3 centuries. Agriculture is already super efficient. We have massive technology there, but being able to predict and hopefully even solve for some of the climate change that we're seeing, not just in terms of wind and flood, but also the second-order effects of that in terms of food. The invasion of Ukraine has shown every company in the world how stretched and vulnerable their supply chain is. And many of us have learned that lesson since 2019. AI can help with so many of those things, can help make our lives better. Having an AI assistant that mutters in your ear. If you're not good with names, it can say, "That's John Smith." Think how helpful that would be here in Davos. If a little highlight of somebody walking down the other side of the street that you're desperately trying to get an interview with or to sell to. Well, you can look at that both ways, I guess, depending where you are. But the challenge of all that is making sure that we guide it in the right way. We shouldn't be overlords. We shouldn't be stentorian. We shouldn't be banging desks. We should be guiding toward pushing further into space. Mars is an airless desert and it's freezing. Why would you go there? But think of all the resources that are out there in terms of asteroids, the metals, the resources that we need. Think about how we solve for nuclear fusion. I'm going to stop now because we could go on forever on that basis. But there's a huge horizon of things that we could do. That's the point. We could do so many things with artificial intelligence if we guide ourselves the right way. I said to some of the gentlemen earlier on, I kind of view this as we're back in the 1950s. We've got the space race, the arms race, we've got the nuclear race, we've got these things called computers, which are now kind of cool. We're exactly in that same place now with a paradigm shift in terms of the tools available to us as a planet. The important thing for that is we deal with it as a planet, not just in fiefdoms. So off my soapbox.
Well said.
No, that's a great point. And I think you just mapped out my editorial plan for the next 6 months in terms of the topics and stories.
No extra charge, even better, Dan.
That we're going to we'll be addressing, and I'll be calling you up to comment on all these things. But I think that's actually a great place to end it. In charts, it shows both the potential of where we are and the opportunities that are there, but also some of the real perils that we're going to have to navigate as we roll these technologies out. And it sounds like the message I hear from both of you is that yes, there's a role for regulation, but that ultimately this is going to come down to the company executives and the leadership in order to steer the right path and be accountable at some point. So thank you so much for the conversation. Let's give them a big round of applause.
Thank you.